The most vaxxed country on earth is now facing a population crisis. Singapore officials have tried to gaslight the public, but the numbers don't lie. Not only are excess deaths skyrocketing, but birth rates are also plummeting. The cause of this, of course, appears to be the infamous COVID-19 vaccines. The Ministry of Health claims Singapore has one of the lowest excess death rates globally, but the data shows the exact opposite. Singapore is in trouble and the government's narrative doesn't match reality. We now go to an explosive report that breaks down this troubling data. Well, now the most vaxxed country on earth faces a population crisis, and the numbers are staggering. This is a guest post by Aussie17. Singapore recently released its annual birth and death statistics for 2023, and let me tell you, it's not looking good. The annual report on registration of births and deaths provides an overview of the annual changes in the population, births, deaths, and other vital statistics. Specimen certificates of and procedures for the registration of births, stillbirths, and deaths are included in the publication. The damning chart appears on page 1 of the annual statistics report, showing that the natural increase decreased from single digits when the pandemic hit and accelerated when the population started taking the vaccination, reaching double digits at 13% and a staggering 39.4% after the boosters. As I was curious of further historical data, I pulled out the numbers from 2014 to 2018. There was not a single year in the last 10 years where the natural increase dropped by double digits, and you can see some of those statistics there. So one should be stunned when the natural increase shot up to minus 13% in 2021, 2 years after the pandemic started, and first year of vaccination, and in 2022, the natural increase shot up to minus 39.4%, dropping from over 14,000 to 8,714. If you contrast this information to the number of official COVID deaths in Singapore, you can clearly see that the intervention is much worse than the so-called pandemic. For an overview, 2020, Singapore recorded a total of 29 COVID-19 deaths by the end of 2020. In 2021, the cumulative death toll rose to 828 by the end of 21. In 2022, by the end of the year, the total number of COVID-19 deaths in Singapore was 1,727. And in 2023, as of June 4, the cumulative number of deaths reached 1,727, and by July 23, it increased to 2,024. Yes, the total cumulative COVID deaths in Singapore is 2,024, but somehow the population's natural increase, meaning deaths minus lives births, is decreasing and continues to drop by orders of magnitude more than the total COVID deaths so far. During the peak of excess deaths in Q2 of 2023, Singapore ranked number 1 in the world in terms of excess deaths. Subsequently, Singapore was suspiciously removed from the Mortality Watch database. The article says, did someone make a phone call? You can see that chart included there. Singaporeans are looking for answers regarding excess deaths. Just 2 days ago, 2 citizens, aged 72 and 69, were found dead in their homes on the same day. I mean, there are always people dying at home, but 2 in the same day? You can see that article there, 2 bodies in 1 day. This isn't the first time 2 bodies were found on the same day. In 2023, a similar incident occurred with individuals aged 62 and 70. If you start digging into coincidences, you'll find more stories. For example, 2 brothers died a day apart just 2 months ago, aged 72 and 77, also in 2024. The common denominator seems to be these coincidental deaths occurring after approximately 80% of the population received mRNA injection boosters. However, we can't definitively attribute this to vaccines without forensic autopsies, right? Well, according to Singapore's law, Coroner's Act, under deaths for which inquiry must be held, point number 2 states that any death in Singapore that occurred directly or indirectly as a result of any medical treatment or care. You can see that highlighted there. However, for some reason, that specific law was removed in May 2023. This is particularly strange at a time when everyone wants to understand if the experimental injections contributed to excess deaths. The article goes on to say, at this point, I can only express myself with lots of emojis, but at least I'm not the only one. Professor Gabriel Oon, founding president of Singapore's Society of Oncology, just tweeted the same sentiment on X. He says, why was Coroner's Act 2nd of May 2023 amended at the peak of deaths in the country when Singapore was world number one at depopulation with 95% given Pfizer jabs? No more mandatory examination of the dead. No wonder no deaths from vaccines. In regards to live births, on chart 1 of the annual BD Statistics 2023, note the decline in live births in the post-mRNA boosted population in red. You can see that although there is a declining trend in the crude birth rate, the biggest drop in the last 10 years occurred between 2021 and 2022 from 8.6 to 7.9, and it continues to decrease dramatically in 2023 from 7.9 to 7.4. Remember what Professor Pietro Vanazza said about declining births post-vaccination? You can read more about that here and watch that video. But the media propaganda continues in Singapore. This month, Singapore's Ministry of Health made another false claim when through its state media channel News Asia, when the opposition party calls for suspension of COVID-19 vaccines. In the article published on June 3rd, 2024, the Ministry of Health claimed that the primary reason why Singapore recorded one of the lowest excess death rates in the world is because the majority of Singaporeans took the vaccines. Well, this is extremely outrageous since Singapore recorded the highest excess deaths in the world, as shown above. This propaganda campaign in Singapore is not limited to state-funded media. A Singaporean friend recently sent me a high school exam question about the local medical freedom movement, Healing the Divide. In the exam question, it was claimed that the medical freedom group has a history of posting and sharing content that perpetuates falsehoods and misleading information about COVID vaccines. But hold up, we've just given you hard proof that Singapore's Ministry of Health is perpetuating fake news regarding lowest excess deaths. You can see a screenshot of that exam there. Outstanding. Well, this is indeed an indoctrination of the young. The only way I can explain what is happening here is from the context of a biblical spiritual warfare occurring in the world today. This, my friends, is what Jesus referred to as tares.